you love movies and movie discussions, you've come to the right place. Who am I, you ask? I am The Wiz! And I'm here today to review the 1998 Academy Award winner for Best Picture, Shakespeare in Love, starring Joseph Fiennes, Gwyneth Paltrow, Geoffrey Rush, Tom Wilkinson, Colin Firth, and Judi Dench, directed by John Madden. Not that John Madden, but John Madden. I did this joke the last time. I don't think it was that funny then. I don't know why I repeated it. I'm sorry. I think the one thing that Shakespeare in Love is most known for now, and there might be some that will debate this, but in the past 30 years, I would say this is probably the most surprising win for Best Picture in the past 30 years for the Oscars. Remember it when, God, was it? It was 99 when this when this won Best Picture. I remember before the ceremony, it was a lock. Everyone thought it was a lock that Saving Private Ryan was going to win. Saving Private Ryan dominated the box office in the summer. Everyone talked about it. They were still talking about it to that very day. And Spielberg was a lock to get director, which to many thought, well, if Spielberg can get director, usually what happens is the one that wins Best Director will also win Best Picture. And that's not exactly true. That's happened a number of times in the past. But in this case, it shocked everybody when, I think it was Harrison Ford came onto the stage and announced the winner was Shakespeare in Love. I remember this back, I was in high school when this happened, and when that was announced, people were pissed. Not even just kids, because I think a number of kids saw it with their parents and really was affected by that movie. Thought it was technically amazing, but also emotionally resonant. It is a good movie. It really is. But I don't think anyone heard of Shakespeare in Love at the time. But then there was me who saw Shakespeare in Love in theaters and was like, no, I'm for it. I'm good with it. Because I really like Shakespeare in Love. I definitely enjoyed the movie quite a bit when I saw it in high school. If you look at the Oscars for that year, for 98, the list of films that got nominated were, like, it was big. The nominees for Best Picture that year, if you look back, are stacked. Like, it is 5 really good movies. The nominees were the eventual winner, Shakespeare in Love, Saving Private Ryan, Thin Red Line, Life is Beautiful, and Elizabeth. I think all 5 are great movies. At least 4 stars for all 5 of them. If I were to be honest, the one that I think is the best is the Thin Red Line, Saving Private Ryan, Shakespeare, Life is Beautiful, and then Elizabeth. And again, Elizabeth is a great movie. Cate Blanchett's great in that movie. But yeah, if I'm being completely fair, it used to be Thin Red Line, Shakespeare in Love, Saving Private Ryan, and then Life is Beautiful, Elizabeth. But after this review, I'm switching it over to Thin Red Line, Saving Private Ryan. I think Saving Private Ryan technically is an amazing film, and it does really well for what it is, but there's something about the Thin Red Line that I think is just an amazing movie that I think should have won. But am I mad that Shakespeare in Love won? No, it's a great movie, but you know, that's just my feeling of it. But I do understand why a lot of people were upset that Saving Private Ryan didn't win, because it's really the only film around that time that was really emotionally effective that they watched. I don't think anyone heard of Life is Beautiful. Wow, I'm just remembering. I think I've seen all 5 of these movies in theaters. Yeah, I did. That's rare. I haven't done that in a long time. But yeah, all 5 of the movies I saw in theaters, loved all 5 of the movies. But Thin Red Line, I think, is the best of the 5. So there you go. Like, am I upset that Shakespeare in Love won? No, I think it deserved it. But I think that's what people remember Shakespeare in Love for, is that it robbed Saving Private Ryan of Best Picture. And I think I hear people still talk about this to this very day. And there are reasons why. There are many people think it was more of Harvey Weinstein's chicanery that led to that win, which, to be fair, that might be the case. He was a big power player back then. He was until the whole scandal he had in the 2010s. I still think it deserves the win. Maybe not over Saving Private Ryan, but I won't say that it was robbed. I think Shakespeare in Love is a very good movie that deserved its win. All right, so let's get into the review of Shakespeare in Love, directed by John Madden. But before we get to that, let's get to the plot. This is about a young Will Shakespeare who starts a relationship with a young woman that blossoms into him creating his all-time favorite play, Romeo and Juliet. Joseph Fiennes plays William Shakespeare, and the love interest, Viola, is played by Gwyneth Paltrow. It's about him creating the play and finding the inspiration to write the play through his whirlwind romance with Viola in this movie. That's basically the film's basic plot. So why don't I get to my 3 points? And my first point for Shakespeare in Love is it's a knowing celebration of Shakespeare's work. When I saw Shakespeare in Love in theaters in 98, I was like most people in high school when they heard Shakespeare and were rolling their eyes going, oh God, why can't they just speak normal? My eyes glazed over and I was like, all right, God, yeah, doth twixt my bosom in, oh, for fuck's sake. I'm like a lot of high school kids, and I just kind of zoned out. I was like, oh my God, I can't stand this. It wasn't until I saw Shakespeare in Love where I'm like, oh, okay. I guess I get now why people love it so much. And Shakespeare in Love is interesting because if you are aware of Shakespeare's work, like I am now, I like Shakespeare's work. I've read a lot of his plays now and some of his poetry. And I appreciate his work now, but back then I didn't. But I must say this. Like, the film got a ton of winks, nods, references to a plethora of his work and I would also say his inspirations and who he inspired. There is a ton of references to plays like Hamlet, Twelfth Night, Romeo and Juliet. There are a number of them. Some of them are very subtle, but a lot of them are very obvious, but they're done in a clever way where it's enjoyable. And I think this is my first point because I really think whether you love him, like him, or you're like, he's good. I wouldn't go about reading his play on my own, but I enjoy Shakespeare, sure. I think there are things you will like about this movie. And because I was familiar enough with Shakespeare, I really like the referential nature of this film. My second point, it is a quaint, charming comedy of words. I think some of the best things about this movie is the comedy. I think it's surprisingly funny. It shocked me, too, because when I watched it in theaters, what really got me in this movie was the love story, the romance. That's where I was hooked into this movie. And then the Shakespearean stuff was like, oh, yeah, that's neat. It's the exact opposite. The comedic wordplay in this movie is utterly hilarious at times. It's also charming in ways, too. I think you would have to have an appreciation of creativity and of theater to a certain extent. I'm not really a theater guy. I'm very much a movie guy. But there are a lot of cross-sections between movies and theater. So I do get, to a certain extent, what the movie is coming from in certain aspects. But, man, like the comedy of words, the way that the film does its dialogue is really smart and funny. It does have a little bit of the flowery language that Shakespeare's plays had, but it doesn't have it all the time. So you're not having a lot of those really flowery, really flamboyant language that I think a lot of people, when they read it, get really confused and roll their eyes at and go, oh God, just say the fucking words, please. Like, someone just tell me what they're saying. There's really not a lot of that, but it's only there when they're referencing Shakespeare, which on the one hand can seem a little corny, but I think it really works in this film. It adds to the charm of the comedy, so I really like the wordplay of Shakespeare in Love. And my third point, a lacking romantic plot. Yeah, this is the thing that really surprised me. I mentioned in the second point, the thing that really captured me when I first saw it in the theater was the romance. I think this is my fourth viewing of the film, I think the romance is the most lacking part. It's not bad. I'm not saying it's a bad romance. It just didn't have that spark that made me believe what was going on screen. I don't think it's necessarily the actor's fault here. The actors Joseph Fiennes and Gwyneth Paltrow. I think separately, and when they're doing the play stuff, and Gwyneth Paltrow's character is dealing with her life outside of the play, I think they're really good. But together, when the romance starts, something doesn't spark. Something doesn't click. I think the point of the film is to be more of a comedy of words referencing Shakespeare than to be a romance. I think romance was the backseat of this film. Even though it's weird because the film is literally called Shakespeare in Love. But I really think the point of Shakespeare in Love is to be a movie that takes all of Shakespeare's work and finds a clever way to show how he could have found inspiration. Because if you really pay attention to the movie, nearly everything that happens in the movie is referenced in other things, which pretty much denotes that what happens in this film inspired his later works, which is utterly ridiculous, but it's still funny and kind of charming in that way. So the romantic plot didn't do much for me. It really kind of fell flat. Again, I'm not saying it's bad, but it just doesn't hit as much as the comedy does. But the comedy is, I think, the strongest thing about this movie. Okay, so if you're on YouTube, I am starting a new segment, and this is where I take a scene from the film, and I use it to show a point from one of the points that I have on my review. In this scene, I am going to use the scene in Shakespeare in Love after he meets the real Viola. At this point, before the scene, he only met Thomas Kent. This is where he meets Viola for real for the first time. And this scene is particularly funny because it proves 2 points to me, in my opinion. It proves to me how good the comedy and referential nature of the film is, but also how weak the romance scene. This scene basically is after the party when they are introduced, and Will is trying to get Viola's attention. Let's watch.
Romeo, Romeo, a young man of Verona. A comedy by William Shakespeare.
My lady!
Who's that?
Will Shakespeare.
Madam! Anon, good nurse, anon! Master Shakespeare.
The same, alas.
Oh, but why alas?
A lowly player.
Alas, indeed. For I thought you the highest poet of my esteem, and a writer of plays that capture my heart.
Oh, I am him too.
Madam? Anon! I will come again.
Oh, I am fortune's fool. I will be punished for this. Oh, my lady, my love.
If they find you here, they will kill you.
You can bring them with a word.
Oh, not for the world. Madam! Anon!
Okay, so I want to notate a few things. Of course, this scene is very referential to Romeo and Juliet. This is probably the most obvious referential scene in the film. But it's also pretty cleverly done because it's awkward. It's not as flowery. It's not as romantic. It's actually very funny. And what eventually happens at the end kind of goes with the funniness and the referentialness of the comedy in the movie. I think some would debate with me and say, well, this is not meant to be a romantic scene. This is supposed to be a scene that is more comedic in nature. But I would kind of disagree. I think you are right and wrong on that. This is supposed to drive the point forward that they are both romantically interested in each other, whereas the beginning scene where they just locked eyes with each other was kind of like the hint of something happening. This is the confirmation of this. This is how the romance is supposed to basically start and drive. In this scene, while it helps the referential comedic nature of the film, I think hurts it romantically, because then you are not expecting it to drive into the specific nature of the romance that it does, which is very lustful and very much a sexual nature in the film. Because the romance, I think, is treated pretty seriously in the film and not as comedically as everything else, I think it kind of dissipates the power of the romance in this film. I don't think that's the fault of the actors. I think it's the way that the film's paced and the way that the writing is from the rest of the film. It just seems like the romance is sandwiched into the film, and I think this scene really shows to me exactly how that is. It's because when you're introduced to the romance and it really starts to develop, it's more comedic in nature. So you're already expecting it to be a more comedically natured romance, and it doesn't do that in this film. It becomes much more serious, much more flowery, much more of a romanticized romantic film, when it comes to the romance. I just don't think it matches at that end with the rest of the comedic nature of the film. Okay, so who do I recommend this for? I recommend this for a Shakespeare fan. I mean, there's so many references and allusions to his work and things that he's done. I'm not a Shakespeare historian, but I've heard that a lot of Shakespeare historians are really not entirely happy with this film because it takes a lot of creative licensing. I don't care. I'm fine with that. So I think if you're a Shakespeare fan, you would really enjoy the referential nature of this movie. And if you enjoy wordplay comedy, if you enjoy comedies from a lot of comedies that deal with dialogue more than just slapstick and physical humor, there is a little bit of physical humor in this movie, but if you are more into dialogue comedy, this movie is very good with that. Who would not recommend this for? If romance is the key drive of watching the film, I think the romance is the weakest part, and if that is mainly why you're watching this, I wouldn't say not watch it, but it's not the strongest thing about this movie. And I might be wrong. There's a lot of people who enjoy this movie for the romance, but I think it's the weakest part of the film. And who I not recommend this for is that if you fell asleep during Shakespeare lessons in class. I mean, yeah. Even though the flowery language is not as potent as it is in most Shakespearean plays, it's still there. So the wittiness and the comedic parts might go over your head. And if you're not interested in Shakespeare, you're not going to get the jokes and the references that are in this movie. So if you hear Shakespeare and go, ugh, I don't want nothing to do with this, then don't. Just don't bother. Overall, I recommend this. I don't love it as much as I did when I saw it in theaters back in '98, but I still very much like this. I still think it's a great movie. I'm just surprised that the romance didn't hit as hard as the last time. And I really think it's because the comedic elements and the referential elements are what present in the movie as the main things, which is, again, kind of strange because it's called Shakespeare in Love, and the whole plot revolves around the romance between Shakespeare and Viola. So it's weird. I am recommending it. I'm recommending it highly, actually, even though I think the thing that it advertises is its weakest part. Again, I recommend Shakespeare in Love. It's a very good to great movie. Check it out if you haven't. Now, if you want my full review on this movie, you can go to my website at IamTheWiz.com. You'll have my full written review right on the site, along with a link to the video that has this review that you've just listened to. Thank you for listening to this review. If you want to know what we're reviewing in the next couple of days, you can look on the screen right now to see what's coming up next. If you like what you heard, go ahead and leave a like on this video. If you want to discuss your opinion on the film or the review itself, please leave a comment. And if you want to hear more, subscribe to the channel. Thank you again for listening. I will talk to you next time.